आप खड़े, आप अपने मुल्क को इन चोरों के हवाले, हमारा लीडर इमरान खान सच के साथ खड़े।
This is a very hectic entrance to Imran Khan's residency here in Lahore right now, and as you can see, there's a lot of people that have shown up. All these people are supporters of his. Why are you outside his house right now?
Without the government, imported government has arrived here to arrest him.
So you're protecting Imran Khan against arrest?
Protecting Imran Khan. We are fighting for Imran Khan. Inshallah, we will die for him, inshallah.
Why?
Because he is original leader of Islamic are all over the world.
Imran Khan, the man at the centre of Pakistan's political chaos right now. From cricketing hero to Prime Minister to an ousted opposition leader fighting for survival.
And they want me in jail so that I cannot contest elections.
Imran Khan has been kicked out of government just last year. He's now hoping to make a political comeback. Things are very, very tense. The police have been camped outside his house, and we're heading right into the belly of the beast to meet the man himself. It is a very interesting time in Pakistan at the moment. Right outside your house, there's been police who came to try and arrest you just last night. Around them are all your supporters that we just passed coming in here today. How does it feel to be in the middle of this firestorm?
What I always hoped one day would be my people being politically aware, understanding what true freedom is. The demand in Pakistan is for real freedom, which means justice, which means fundamental rights. In my 26 years of politics, it's the first time I feel that people realize that they want true freedom.
30 years ago, you were one of the greatest cricket players of all time. You were a national hero, a captain for this country. Did you know you were going to be Prime Minister of this country?
No, it was never my ambition because I was focused completely on cricket. I played 21 years of international cricket. And when I went into politics, it was the biggest challenge. And I would not have gone there had I not already gone through the mill in my life of facing ups and downs. 3.5 years as a Prime Minister was the most difficult thing I'd ever done because our country was bankrupt. But you never look back in life because people ask me, you had such a great glamour life as a cricketer. I look upon that life and, I don't even remember it. It means nothing to me.
Really? There's not a tiny part of you that misses it? So many people will remember you from, being splashed across the Daily Mail. My mum's a big fan. You were a total babe magnet. You don't miss that life free of responsibility
Never.
At all?
Not even once have I ever missed that life. In fact, I don't even watch any cricket anymore.
It is time for fresh faces to come into Pakistani politics.
Since bursting into politics in 1996 and being elected Prime Minister in 2018, the challenges facing Imran Khan have been enormous. Just a few months back, Khan was leading a rally when he was shot 3 times in the leg. What was it like for you, knowing that someone is shooting at you?
Well, I was expecting an attempt on my life, and I had predicted that for 2 months. When I heard the gunshots, I thought they were firecrackers. But then I had this awful feeling in my right leg. I had 3 bullets in my left leg, and one of them had broken my bone. But it also had damaged my nerve in my foot. But even when I was lying down, I thanked the Almighty because I knew I was saved.
And what about now? I mean, are you scared?
Well, the threat of assassination is probably even more now than before because the 3 people who I knew were responsible for this, they're still sitting in power. And they're probably more worried now than ever before because all indications are that whenever there are elections, my party is going to sweep the elections.
Despite Khan's finger-pointing at the current government, there's no evidence that the ruling party was behind the assassination attempt. But they have pushed back the date for the next elections and filed dozens of legal cases against him, which is widely seen as an attempt to prevent him from running again. You are facing some very serious legal charges right now. There's a possibility that could lead to a prison sentence.
The corruption cases against me, there's just one, what they're saying, when you get public gifts in Pakistan, they are saying that I sold one of the gifts. So I want a public hearing about this. I want this to be in public, covered by the media when this case comes to court.
How would you handle prison?
I survived an attempt. I'm really lucky to be alive. So, I mean, prison will be, I guess when it comes to it, I'll go to it. But if I don't fight for my country, who will?
A few days after this interview was filmed, the violence escalated. One supporter was killed, and when the police unsuccessfully tried to arrest Khan at his home, 2 full days of chaos ensued. You're fighting for political survival. You are telling your people to go out on the streets, to march, to go to jail for you. You're calling for early elections. You say that your priority is economic and political stability. Do you ever think that if you were to step aside, if you were to let go, the government could get on with running the economy?
If the current government was worried about economic stability, why did they conspire to remove our government? We only had 1.5 years left. So why? What was the hurry? The Prime Minister was about to be convicted. His sons were about to be convicted on billions of rupees of corruption. So the hurry was they didn't want to remove the government because there was a problem with the economy or they were worried about inflation. They wanted to remove the government because they wanted to get rid of the corruption cases, which they did.
Inshallah, corruption. मेरा ये आपसे वादा है कि मैं आपको काबू करके दिखाऊंगा.
You came into power promising to eradicate corruption within 6 months. You haven't done that. Corruption perception index worsened during your rule.
The problem in Pakistan is that we have what is called elite capture. The ruling elite is above law. So it's not just Pakistan's problem, it's the problem with the entire developing world. My whole campaign is to bring the powerful crooks under the law. And why I failed, unfortunately, because the National Accountability Bureau, which deals with corruption, was not under me, was under the army chief.
So you're saying you don't have control over the military?
Because the army chief had the veto, I could not get the powerful crooks convicted, which is why we could not improve on our corruption index. If you cannot bring the powerful under the rule of law and hold them accountable, then I'm afraid, how can you control corruption?
तब तक निकलता रहूंगा जब तक तुम इलेक्शन हम तुम्हारे से जबरदस्ती इलेक्शन करवाएंगे.
You've been very critical of the current government for suppressing free speech, for politically persecuting you, as you say. Under your own government, talk shows were shut down, journalists who've been critical of you were attacked, tortured, detained. As someone who is presenting yourself as a victim, I can see you shaking your head, as someone who is presenting yourself as a victim of persecution and a beacon of free speech.
Not one case against the media was ever instituted by my government.
I mean, there is a long list of journalists who...
Let me just complete it. So not one by my government. What happened was the journalist who got into trouble said something to the army. When I found out, immediately the next day we had them released. Compare that to what's going on now.
That might be true, but I'm asking you about under your rule. You know, the Reporters Without Borders said that, you know, labelled you as a press freedom predator.
The 2 times we found out 2 journalists were picked up, we immediately took action.
And what about the others? There were people who were shot outside their homes, there were people whose talk shows were shut down.
Talk shows was shut down only on 2 people who apparently said something against the army, not against my government.
The army has ruled Pakistan for half the country's existence, and critics accuse them of still pulling the strings in the country's politics. You blame the military for many things. Why should people vote for you if you can't control the military?
My responsibility was fighting corruption, but I did not have the authority on the institution that was supposed to be a tool to fight corruption, NAB, which was controlled by the army chief.
Do you not feel like it needs to be dismantled in order to actually have a free and fair country, as you say?
There needs to be a balance. No management system works if the Prime Minister has the responsibility, but he doesn't have the authority.
Another force Khan has tried to find balance with is the Taliban.
We must strengthen this current government, stabilize it, for the sake of the people of Afghanistan.
Nicknamed Taliban Khan, he's known for his softer approach to the group. When the Taliban took Afghanistan, you noted that the Taliban had promised to uphold human rights and to form an inclusive government. It's been 2 years now, and the Taliban does not have an inclusive government. The human rights record is not looking good, especially for women's rights, as I'm sure you're aware. Is there any part of you that regrets a somewhat softer attitude towards the Taliban?
You see, unfortunately, in the West, all you look upon Afghanistan is Taliban and anti-Taliban. We in Pakistan look upon Afghanistan as our neighbor, and after 40 years, for the first time, there's peace in Afghanistan. Now, what I said was the Western countries must get them into the mainstream. Because the more you mainstream them, the more influence you would have in enforcing human rights. But if you isolate them, what leverage has any country got left now to tell them to send your girls to school or human rights? You can't.
But human rights are suffering. We visited Afghanistan after the Taliban takeover and witnessed firsthand the erosion of women's rights.
Now that the Taliban are fully back in control, we're getting a lot of very disapproving stares from people for being the only women in here. So what kind of guidelines are you giving people in terms of how they should be living here?
لباس په حق کې قرآن چې هدایت کو چې ښځې باید داسې لباس واغوندي چې هغه جلب نظر د خلکو ونه کړي او قرآن کریم مطلب یې د ښځو دپاره چې وقرن فی بیوتکن په خپلو کورو کې کښېنئ.
Can you understand, why international communities of the West can't be sending so much money and can't be recognising the Taliban government if, they're not allowing girls to go to school, they're not allowing women to work, they're not allowing women in public spaces?
But my point is this an effective way of trying to influence Afghanistan by condemning them and ordering them and isolating them? The question asked by the Western countries, what should be their interest? A stable government in Afghanistan, there shouldn't be any international terrorism. But if you isolate them, why would they listen to anyone? That's my only point.
Khan says the dire situation for women in Afghanistan will not benefit from the world's isolation. But what about the women in his own country? There's a strong movement of young Pakistani women at the moment who are fighting for gender equity in this country. Do you support those Pakistani feminists in their fight for gender equity?
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, and Pakistan is very fortunate in a lot of ways when you compare what is going on, in other countries. I mean, we have a woman twice became prime minister.
But you say that, women are in a good situation then in Pakistan, but why did you have so few of them in your top brass when you were in government?
Well, it's a merit system.
You had one of the worst records of female representation over the last few governments.
Yeah, but look, you want a system of merit. In the US, you haven't had a woman prime minister, a president so far. The point is that you select a cabinet on merit, people who are going to deliver.
If you do get back into power, will you work to improve that record?
No, it's not a question. Look, when you come into power, your number one priority is to deliver to the people, give them governance. So to give them governance, you need the best people in the best ministries.
And there aren't good women?
So if they are, like Shireen Mazari, one of our most powerful ministers, you don't just fill in spaces just because of quotas, because in the end, the people are going to ask you, we expected you to deliver, what is your result?
Khan doesn't just see himself as a champion of women's rights, but also as a staunch defender of Muslims around the world. A record that's also been called into question. I've covered human rights for a decade. The worst human rights atrocity that I've ever covered is the repression of Muslim Uyghurs in China. There is so much disappointment amongst the Uyghur community that leaders of Muslim countries, including yourself, have not spoken out to condemn these actions. Does it grate on you at all that you haven't been able to speak out?
Look, Isabel, problem is there's Imran Khan as a human rights activist. I used to speak about everything, not just Muslims. Wherever there was discrimination and human rights abuse, I would speak up against it. When you become the prime minister, your number one priority becomes, in my case, 220 million people of Pakistan. When that is your number one priority, then you have to be very careful.
You don't have the luxury to criticize.
Poor countries do not have the luxury to criticize when they have a huge amount of vulnerable people. Rich countries, unfortunately, they too are selective.
But China isn't the only country Khan refuses to criticize. He happened to be visiting Russian President Vladimir Putin the very day he invaded Ukraine. What was Putin like that day? You got a front row seat to war breaking out and him literally launching war that day.
The morning, just before, an hour before my meeting, we found that they had invaded Ukraine. So I first thought he might cancel the meeting. Then I thought it would be a brief meeting. I didn't think I would be sitting there for 3 hours.
Did you bring it up with him?
And he gave the Russian point of view. Why didn't the West include Russia in NATO? Why is this alliance against Russia? And why at the doorstep? So he had his point of view. Of course, the West has their own point of view. My point is that, we as countries should stay neutral. We became part of the US war on terror. 80,000 Pakistanis were killed. Over $100 billion were lost to the economy. There were 400 drone attacks by the US on an ally in Pakistan. And what did we gain out of this? One lesson Pakistan has learned is stay out of other people's conflicts.
कौन बचाएगा पाकिस्तान? इमरान खान, इमरान खान। कौन बचाएगा पाकिस्तान? इमरान खान, इमरान खान। कौन बचाएगा पाकिस्तान?
Are you enjoying this fight?
Yes, because I think if I woke up and there was no challenge in my life, I would think it's the end of my life.
So there's never a point you're going to step aside?
I don't know, because right now I see this huge challenge in front of me. So I'm just focused on that. What happens after that, I don't know. Get Pakistan out of this quagmire is going to be probably the most phenomenal thing that anyone could ever do.
I'm Afshin Ratansi, and welcome to Going Underground, broadcasting all around the world from Dubai in the UAE. In today's very special episode, we're joined by the democratically elected 22nd Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, overthrown 1 year ago, ostensibly by the country's National Assembly. Since he was overthrown, he has been shot as well as charged with dozens of crimes from corruption to terrorism, with attempts made to arrest and assassinate him. We must tell you that if you're watching this broadcast on Saturday, this episode was filmed on Wednesday, the 22nd of March 2023. Former Prime Minister and Chair of the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf Party, Imran Khan, joins me now from Lahore, capital of Punjab province in Pakistan. Thank you so much, Imran, for coming on the show. It's been so long since I interviewed you last in London when you wanted to be Prime Minister. Since then, you've been overthrown, you've been shot and injured, your family has been targeted. How real are the assassination plots against you right now as we speak?
The assassination plots, unfortunately, are real. The attempt on me, when I was very lucky, I'm lucky to be alive, who had 3 bullets in my legs. I was warning for almost 2 months before the attempt. I gave the exact manner in which they were going to try and assassinate me. And blame it on a religious fanatic, but it was all done by people in power, the Prime Minister, the Interior Minister, and one senior intelligence agency guy. They had planned this murder or assassination, and I was lucky to be alive. And unfortunately, they're still in a position of power. And so therefore, even though the investigation had started, but they scuttled the investigation because it was pointing in the direction of a proper conspiracy on the lines which I had predicted. And therefore, they just, they sabotaged the investigation. So the threat is real because these people are sitting in power. They are petrified that if I win the elections, they would be in trouble or held accountable. So there have been 2 attempts since then, which I was saved by the Almighty. Just in the nick of time, there are 2 attempts to bump me off. One was on Saturday. There was a proper attempted, I almost walked into this death trap. And in the nick of time, I got back because they had planned, to kill me there. And then I discovered that they were going to do another action against, on Wednesday, they were going to do this action where my supporters were there and they were planting people in my supporters who would have fired at the police, and the police in retaliation would have killed my supporters and eventually come after me. So, it's a difficult time in Pakistan because we have a government which is adrift. We have a government which cannot which cannot cope with the economic situation in the country, which is we're passing through the worst crisis in our history.
the worst governance system in our history. And then we have people who are petrified of elections. So the elections on two main provinces have been announced by the Supreme Court on the 30th of April. They are petrified that their elections, my party will sweep them. Because in all opinion polls, my party is poised to win 2/3 majority in Pakistan. Hence, them wanting to get rid of me. Out of the 37 by-elections in the last few months, my party has swept 30 of them. So, the reason you asked me in the beginning, how real is the threat is real until the elections, because they worry that if the elections take place, I come back into power, they would be held accountable.
I'll get to the economy in a moment. Is it true that, as PTI leader Fawad Chaudhry says in the Indian papers, actually caught up with the story first, that you are going to be part of multi-party negotiations, agreeing on a process for new elections? And does that make any difference as regards yourself? Because, of course, you're banned from going for these elections by Pakistani authorities.
Well, I'm not banned at all. But there are 143 cases against me filed by the government. 143. It must be some world record. Remember, I have been in the public eye for the last 50 years. I'm the most well-known Pakistani in our history. And people know me. I have never broken any law. And suddenly in the last few months, in trying to remove me from the election race, they have filed 143 cases so far, which start from blasphemy to sedition to terrorism. Most of them are terrorism.
Well, supporters in the peace movement in, say, NATO countries say that it was your opposition to drones, things that you've done certainly would have irritated the CIA and Antony Blinken. But what about these gifts that you received from foreign governments when you were PM between 2018 and 2022? What about those charges?
In 70 years of Pakistan history, the law says that when a head of state or anyone in power, ministers or army generals or anyone, when they receive gifts, then the law says that you pay a certain amount to the state. It used to be 20%. In my time, it was 50%. When you paid 50%, the gifts were yours to do whatever you want. The gifts you did not claim were auctioned in the market. So this has been the law for 70 years. And I'm waiting for this charge. This is an allegation. I'm waiting for this to go to court. You will find out, and the people will find out, the only head of state, possibly the only head of state who went by the book, who declared everything and who did everything legal is sitting here.
Well, of course, some might say that you appointed people when you were Prime Minister that I don't know whether you think they were part of a conspiracy. Former spokesperson Nadeem Afzal-Khan, why is he saying things like, I was impressed by Imran Khan's anti-corruption platform, was tired of the status quo, but then saw that while Khan publicly talked about the poor privately, he surrounded himself with wealthy investors. What do you make of that? And others that you appointed? I mean, you appointed people that now criticize you.
Look, this guy came from another party, joined me before 2018 elections, and then he lost the elections. And so as a consolation, I gave him some advisorship. And then he went back to the party he came from. So when you go back, what are you going to say? Why did you leave your party and now why are you back? What else is he going to say? Oh, I'm really disappointed. I thought this was this. I mean, these are politicians. What are they going to say? Remember, the only government that has been removed in our history and not removed for corruption was my government. When my government was removed, in 17 years, we had the best economic performance. And that's documented in the Economic Survey of Pakistan, an annual report published on the economy, published by this government. So it has the best economic record in 17 years, and it was not removed on corruption.
Obviously, that's been disputed by the opposition. You tweeted on Sunday, fascism is at unprecedented levels under the premiership of your successor, Nawaz Sharif's brother, Shahbaz. Does that include the ISI boss, Nadeem Anjum? Is he a fascist? And what is the role of the military here? Because to have fascism, you need a strong military. Are you saying that there are others beside the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister, that are part of fascism in modern-day Pakistan?
Never in a democratic government have our fundamental rights of the citizens, our democratic rights, never the freedom of speech, never has it been so much at stake as right now. I mean, all these rights have disappeared. Pakistan is passing through the worst human right catastrophe in our democratic history. Yes, in some military dictatorships, there was probably similar circumstances. But in General Musharraf's dictatorship, it was liberal compared to what we are going through right now.
Well, that's obviously quite a statement. Have you had any contact with U.S. authorities? Because the optics of your overthrow were that you were with Vladimir Putin as the response by Russia to NATO provocation, as Russia saw it, happened in Donbass. And there's been very little support for you from Washington. But on the other hand, you've tempered your initial charges that Washington was the sole conspirator of the coup that you allege.
When my government was removed, so just to give your viewers exactly what happened, a cipher, which is a correspondence from our ambassador in Washington, with his conversation with the American Undersecretary of State of South Asia. It was a recorded conversation in terms that there were note takers on both sides. So it was an official meeting.
This is Donald Liu, right? Antony Blinken's diplomat.
Yeah, so that correspondence, which is called the cipher, secret correspondence, arrived at the Foreign Office and at my desk. Now, what did it say? Donald Liu is telling the Pakistani ambassador that if you do not remove Imran Khan, your prime minister, in a vote of no confidence, there will be consequences for Pakistan. The next day, there's a vote of no confidence against me, a government that had the best economic performance in 17 years.
But as you know now, Shehbaz Sharif is saying they have leaked audio of you saying we must use this. I mean, that doesn't necessarily negate the fact that the Biden administration was trying to overthrow you, but was that true too, the audio recording of you saying we must use this? One can understand you wanting to use it after all.
It's a conversation which was taped by the secret agencies, and then they doctored it. You know now if they tape your conversation, I mean, with artificial intelligence, you can actually do anything. So they doctored the conversation. But let me just make it clear.
So it's a fake tape.
So no, it was doctored. There were some things that were right, but then there were, you can easily doctor it. But the point is, I made that cipher public. I couldn't publish what was in the exactly correspondence because it's a secret code. But we put that cipher in front of our cabinet, our National Security Council. Pakistan officially demarched the US for interfering in our internal affairs. So that's the cipher. But later on, we discovered what you were referring to. We discovered that it was our own army chief who was campaigning against me, who was the main architect of conspiring to remove me.
You're talking about General Asim Munir?
No, I'm talking about General Bajwa. He's the ex-army chief.
Okay.
He was conspiring. He was telling the US he had hired a lobbyist called Hussain Haqqani on our payroll, my government's payroll, who was lobbying against me in Washington, telling the Americans that, look, Imran went to Russia on his own accord, and as if the whole Foreign Office or all the stakeholders were not on board. And that was in the cipher too. And he campaigned that Imran is anti-American and General Bajwa is pro-America. And so therefore, now we discovered that they were poisoned against me because I had a perfect good relationship with the Trump administration.
Former Prime Minister, I'll stop you there. More from the 22nd Prime Minister of Pakistan and Chairman of the PTI, Imran Khan, after this break. Welcome back to Going Underground. I'm still here with overthrown Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan. As you know, the White House has been denying a lot of stories, not least the Nord Stream destruction story revealed by Seymour Hersh. But according to your allegations about the fact you were threatened by consequences as appearing in that cipher or code, the Biden spokesperson, Kate Bedingfield, is on the record for saying there is absolutely no truth to that allegation that you made.
Well, hardly are they going to say that, we were involved in a regime change in Pakistan. Obviously, they would deny it. But the fact is, the cipher was the official conversation between our ambassador in Washington and Donald Lu, and that was reported to me. And the exact words were that you should get rid of your prime minister in a vote of no confidence. And surprisingly, the next day, there was a vote of no confidence.
Well, let's go to the economy then, because you've been talking about the threat to the sovereign debt rating of Pakistan. Why do you believe China is not waiting for you to be back in power in Pakistan? The Asad Majid Khan already been in Beijing. China giving Pakistan $500 million to facilitate, it seems, loans, possible $1.2 billion from the UAE, where I'm talking to you from, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Why are these countries not reacting more extremely, or at least in a way that would suit your political party's position?
Look, you see, from what I can gather, I can only assume this because I have no contact with any of the foreign countries. So I can't say why they're not reacting, but I can assume that what is happening is that countries outside Pakistan, financial institutions outside Pakistan, and all the businesses within Pakistan have lost faith in this government. And why have they lost faith? Because the economy has been so badly managed that we are passing through the worst economic crisis in our history. So our currency has plunged, our growth rate has gone down, our exports, wealth creation. How do you get wealth? By producing, by exporting.
Well, all you did, ironically, was to facilitate the IMF floats, surely. I mean, that's why the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is saying you're derailing your own IMF program. If you were Prime Minister, would you just go along with facilitating Washington money again? Reports are that the IMF may not be sending the $1.1 billion tranche. You'd probably want that Washington money, would you? Rather than a more independent Pakistan with relying on BRICS countries?
The whole object of getting an IMF loan is a bridging loan until you make your structural changes in your economy. That is supposed to be just a bridging loan for you to get on your feet.
But you know that's not what the IMF does to Global South countries.
No. I know that's not what the IMF does, but the countries have to take responsibility. Now, what were we trying to do? Now, I'll just give you an example of what we were trying to do. Raise your revenues, so exports, remittances, raise the number of dollars coming in, because IMF only comes in when you have a shortage of dollars, your current account goes into deficit. So we were trying to raise our revenues and gradually try to squeeze our expenditure. This is what happens when a house goes into debt. Now, what is happening right now is that when your exports start going down, when your remittances start going down, in other words, your dollar income goes down, you're in deep trouble because you're just taking loans, but you have no capacity to pay them back. Unless you create wealth, how are you going to pay your loans back? This is the crunch we've got stuck in right now. We have all these loans accumulating. We are borrowing money, which is why the other countries are reluctant, but our capacity to pay back is being reduced.
So who is in control of Pakistan now? Who is in control of those who want to do you harm?
Well, look, this government was brought in by the ex-army chief, then he was the army chief, General Bajwa. Since then, it's been propped up by the establishment. There are 12 parties coalition which is forming this government, which means no one is in charge. They're all over the place. If the establishment withdrew support from this government, it would go in a day. There's nothing to bind it together. It is just the establishment keeping them together, which is why I'm saying the situation is untenable. At the moment, There is so much political uncertainty. No one trusts the government. The only way forward are free and fair elections. Allow a government come in which has public mandate, the confidence of the people. That is the government then which can start restructuring the economy, making difficult choices, difficult decisions. And only a government with public mandate can get us out of this mess.
And many say that you are the most popular politician in Pakistan. You obviously won the majority of the votes in 2018. But you also know the history of assassinations of Pakistani leaders. Are you still refusing personal bodyguards?
I have, ever since the assassination attempt, when I was extremely lucky to be alive. This young man, when you saw him draw out a gun just 20, 30 feet away from me, had he not put his hand on the gun, it would have hit me on the top body and other people. Because he put his hand on the gun in the last minute, it hit my legs and other people. Plus, there was another shooter in the front. So bullets in the legs meant I went down, and then the bullets from the shooter in front went over the head. So since then, I've taken precautions. Now I speak in front of a bulletproof screen, and I am taking precautions because the guys who planned the assassination are all in power. So those who are supposed to defend me are the ones I am in the greatest danger from.
They, of course, deny that. They say they're protecting you clearly. How do you explain the silence then? I mean, your children's uncle is the UK Minister for Overseas Territories, Lord Goldsmith. He's been on this show. Why nothing from him?
Look, the problems in Pakistan have to be solved by the people of Pakistan. Hardly am I going to ask other countries, look, help me.
No, I was wondering why they didn't volunteer to, as you know, NATO governments have a lot of talking about different countries in the global south. They're just not talking about democracy in Pakistan.
All I want them, countries abroad to talk about are the greatest violation of human rights taking place right now in my country. We actually have the worst form of fascism in this country. Clamp down on media, journalists being put into jail. One of our best investigative journalists, Arshad Sharif, hounded out, killed in Kenya, assassinated. 4 of our top journalists have left the country. And
who killed Arshad Sharif? Do you believe it was Nadeem Anjum, the boss of the ISI?
Well, I believe it was the same gang that tried to kill me.
They would deny that, but you don't have the evidence necessarily.
Well,
this is a top Pakistani journalist killed in Kenya after being in Dubai, of course, for those who don't know him.
So unless you have a proper investigation, how can you find the proofs? And when the investigation was going on in my case, they came and sabotaged all the proofs. This government then just destroyed all the evidence that was collected so far has been destroyed. They have destroyed the Joint Investigating Committee. They've just completely made it redundant. Why? Because they are sitting in power and they know where the investigation was leading. Same as with the journalist Arshad Sharif. His investigation has already been scuttled.
Would you do things differently now? I know Atif Munsif Khan, local PTI leader in Havelian, has been killed this week. Members of your party are being killed. Would you have done things differently as regards the military, the secret services in Pakistan, which you after all led Pakistan? These structures were there under your leadership.
Look, in Pakistan, we have a history. It started off as a security state. We had this big fear of neighbors 7 times our size, which we had in the first 2 decades, 3 wars against them. So the country naturally would have a fear that it might soon not exist, because the neighbor was so huge. And therefore, it started off as a security state. And then whenever the politicians messed up, the army came in and imposed martial law. So we had 3 martial laws. Out of the last 60 years, half we've been ruled by the army and roughly half by these 2 families. So the democratic system still is evolving. It still hasn't evolved properly. Then we had this war on terror. let me just complete. We had the war on terror for almost 15 years. And that again threw us more into a security state where the agencies, the intelligence agencies played a huge role. So we are now trying to evolve a system where there's that equilibrium. At the moment, there is no equilibrium. At the moment, in this case of this government, it is almost completely the establishment running the show.
Are the nuclear weapons safe?
Absolutely. I think if one thing there is a consensus in Pakistan, it is our nuclear weapons, because everyone recognizes that guarantees our security. So there is a consensus across party line. Everyone in Pakistan believes that we must keep them secure.
But but you just said that those elements of the security state have been problematic over recent years, and yet they're in control of the nuclear weapons.
Look, the problems occur between the balance between the military and the civilian relationship. That's where the problem is. It's not as far as the nuclear assets are concerned. There is a consensus in Pakistan that we need to look after them and keep them secure, because that ensures our security and safety.
Well, as your family are attacked, as you're recovering from being shot, as you're under threat of assassination, how is it to view Xi Jinping visiting Moscow and both Putin and Xi heralding almost a new world order, which seems to be very different at first sight to that we've seen since 1945?
I see, great changes taking place. I mean, of course, China and Russia is one, because it seems as if the US's policy is just pushing countries into blocks. Nearer to home, China has brought together Iran and Saudi Arabia. I think that's one of the best developments as far as Pakistan is concerned, because Iran is a neighbor and Saudi Arabia is one of our closest friends for years. So them together eases tensions for us. We feel that it's a great step forward. But what I do not want with these blocs developing, that countries like us should choose either one side or the other. Because India I must admire India's foreign policy. Their idea of non-alignment when there were Cold War, when countries went blocs, India sort of steered making itself a country which is non-aligned, and therefore it had relationship with everyone. And that's what I want Pakistan to be. We don't want to be like we were in the Cold War. We were aligned with the US, and therefore we could not have relationship with the entire Central Asian bloc, which was with the Soviet Union. So now I would really like, from Pakistan's point of view, we need to have trade with Iran, trade with Central Asia, right up to Russia, because these are our neighbors, and China, of course. And one day I hope that we have trade with India, and we have proper relationship with India once, hopefully, the Kashmir issue is solved.
Well, just very, very briefly, if Shehbaz Sharif tried to follow those kinds of geopolitical policies, would he be subject to what you allege you were subjected to by the Biden administration? Would he be overthrown if he wanted to be non-aligned?
Well, look, problem with Shehbaz Sharif and his brother and Asif Zardari is that they have billions of dollars lying outside Pakistan and in Western capitals, properties they've got offshore accounts. And it's not just Pakistani politicians who've stashed monies laundered from their countries into Western capitals and offshore accounts. It's the problem with most of the developing world. And the moment the leadership has money outside its country and the sort of billions of dollars, I'm afraid they can never take independent decisions. They cannot have an independent foreign policy for the benefit of their own people.
Well, of course, all those politicians deny any wrongdoing. They're all welcome to come on the show.
Sure.
Former Prime Minister Imran Khan, thank you. And that's it for the show. We'll be back on Monday. Meanwhile, you can keep in touch via all our social media if it's not censored in your country, and head to our channel, Going Underground TV, on rumble.com to watch new and old episodes of Going Underground. See you on Monday.